back editor-in-chief of Anheuser-Busch, who is going to do a deeper dive on some things that started that technology against goals and the ways in which he's doing it at Anheuser-Busch. Please welcome back Joe and John.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Steve is not. Okay, good. So then I'll do a. Why don't we sit closer together?
I tried to push it back later so we could bring some beers, but I think 11:30 was a little tough.
Well, we are sitting on the bar stools, and we're kind of too far apart now. Yeah, that's all right. You can see the OMA logo behind us. All right, so let me make a reference to Dave Morgan, because he was part of the inspiration and theme, not just for this discussion, but for this event today, and for a lot of things we've been doing in some of our programming and our editorial coverage at MediaPost, because he started writing a series of, he's a regular columnist for us, he writes on the online spin board. He started writing from tech to market inputs to outputs, a lot of what we discussed in the first deep dive question, apologies about the schedule today and things like that, so we're not going to have Dave as part of this, but I'm going to do my best to channel him in this conversation. So the goal here with this discussion is to get a marketer's point of view on where we are. Well, first, I want to ask Johnny if he actually believes the thesis, success principle, that we are going through a transit here, that we are finally maybe shifting from low level, ad tech media inputs into more substantive strategic marketing outcomes, and that technology is enabling that. Is it something you agree with?
Yeah, it's a question. So I think that, for us, we're an extremely data heavy organization, and we often rely with the industry kind of shifting to this place of multi-touch attribution and kind of other analyses that you can do to understand what your media is getting for you. It's kind of more real time, and it also kind of judges the whole ecosystem. So the unfortunate thing for us, though, is that we see this happening in the industry, but it's mostly happening in obviously the direct-to-consumer space. But from our point of view, we obviously face the challenge of being direct-to-wholesaler and therefore wholesaler to retailer. So for us, we're excited about what's coming down the line, but I think when we see the marketing technology, we know that, for a CPG and like all other CPGs, it's still a little bit, out from time.
Okay, well, that's a good point you make, and all marketers are different, but in your particular industry, you have lots of stakeholders. It's not just the consumer, and a lot of the consumer promotions you do are designed to create pull or support from the trade or the distributors or the bars. So maybe we can come back to that in a minute, but I want to answer the question I asked at that last panel, but from your perspective, which is, how would you characterize where we are in this progression? Is it kind of the start of an inflection point? Are we on the cusp of a revolution? Or is this a slow process, or is it something where things are going to change fundamentally in the next few years? How would you characterize that?
Cool. So I think from my point of view, I think it's mostly a progression, and I think that there is kind of momentum building, but to that nature, I think from our point of view, we haven't hit a tipping point yet. And in order to hit a tipping point, I think that there are a few things that need to happen for us from an industry-wide perspective, as well as from an internal perspective. So, the first being kind of media metrics and an identification of those media metrics across different channels, right? So is an impression on, is a view on TV the same as a view on Facebook? Or, even more so within the digital environment, is a view on Snapchat going to be the same as a view on Facebook? And is that going to get us the same output? So I think an understanding of kind of those metrics and then tying it to the outputs is one key thing that, we need to accomplish. The second thing I think is mostly on the industry side of things, and this relates a lot to the technology, is in regards to mobile. So, like most other CPGs, we're shifting a lot of our marketing dollars to mobile, and as a result, that also means a lot of marketing dollars are going to in-app. But one of the big struggles that we've had is how do you track actually in-app inventory? So, a lot of the closed loop providers just cannot do this, and a lot of the technology providers just can't do that. And then the third aspect, I think, would be, at a marketing tech conference or anything of that sort, I'd be remiss not to mention kind of the walled gardens of the world, Facebook, Google, and such. But the point being that I think, we measure the outputs, of these partners on a regular basis, on one-off occasions, Facebook on its own or thing like that, as well as kind of MMM. But, what we're looking to do is for them to share and kind of be part of the technology community so we can look at it from a holistic view. So, it is a progression, but I think that, we still have some stuff to do in order for it to reach that tipping point from kind of our CPG perspective.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because based on your answers, you referred to media metrics, you talked about platforms like mobile and Facebook. It does sound to me like you're thinking fairly media-centric because those are inputs. I know you are the digital manager, so that makes sense. But can you talk a little bit about where you are in the curve of taking that thinking and moving it down the line now? I know some brands, I think, have gone too far down the line where it's all about sales and revenues, and they've kind of lost all the other KPIs. But talk a little bit about where you are in that transition from thinking about the impression or the like or whatever metric you're using to this guy's going to buy more bud.
Yeah, good question. So I think for us, it's a balancing act, right? So, I think we're in the middle of the road, and some areas we do, we know that, if we do X, Y, and Z, we're going to see, this from an outcome perspective. And if our CPMs are, at this dollar price, it is going to look good, from that perspective. But with that said, I think that it's a continuous test and learn process. And, what we've put in place is obviously a roadmap to say, hey, what are we going to be testing this year and what are we, testing next year? The challenge that we face is that, the tools that we have, kind of to allude to my earlier point, is, are still type things like closed loop analysis and MMM, which take a long time to get back. So kind of our learning plans might be a little bit longer than obviously we'd have hoped. But then at the same time, I think that there's a balancing act of, as you kind of mentioned, driving short-term sales and then kind of driving brand equity. Because, at the end of the day, you still have these soft metrics, like brand love, and, we could be pushing a product that people don't love, and that's not going to help us in the long term. So I think from that, standpoint, it's a difficult question, and it's something we always kind of grapple with, but it's a balancing act from our end.
Okay. So I had a question for you, and I didn't think I'd ever be able to pose it this way, but just before this, we hit the stage, Johnny was reminding me that before Anheuser-Busch, you worked for Dannon, and actually those two brands have something in common, which is they're both about fermentation, and they both use culture. So
there's a trend in my career, so.
Well, so I'm going to continue the trend and ask you a culture question, and it goes back to this famous Peter Drucker line, which is that culture always eats strategy, and in this case, maybe drinks strategy. But my question is, we've been talking about this idea of shifting to a more comprehensive view of marketing, getting away from short-term media for a long time, but this is upfront week. We're still obsessed about network upfronts and even new fronts, and it's still all about reinforcing this old mentality of buying impressions. And it seems like the more we change, the more things stay the same. And so my question for you is, do you think this is just a repetitive cycle? We'll continue to go through and go, and this year we'll be talking more about MarTech, and next year we'll be talking more about impressions.
Yeah, so I think that, in regards to the upfronts, I'll answer, for you guys from a digital perspective, and our media team might have, a slightly different answer. But I do think that culture will exist, right? If you look at the purpose, right now, even for myself, for kind of the upfronts or the new fronts, is that they still do kind of serve a very healthy purpose. So one of those being, I think that, going to the upfronts or the new fronts allow us to understand what trends are going on in the marketplace, right? So if you're going to meet with a YouTube of the world or whatever that might be, you can understand, hey, what are they launching next year? And what is that going to mean for the overall industry, right? So, our belief is that they do still have kind of a grip hold on where culture is going because, they're obviously a large voice. And then I think the second thing that's important to us, especially from my end, is that you could be as automated as you want, and you could have all this DSPs and technology and kind of all of that aspect of it. But the fact is that going to these upfronts and things like that are still valuable in terms of getting on the ground floor for kind of custom opportunities and things like that. So I think that it's a balancing act of, yes, you're kind of to the left, you have this dream of kind of data-driven, everything's automated, it's a machine, and then you just plug and play. But on the other end of things, I think that there's still a huge opportunity to work with these guys on a regular basis for some amazing kind of creative opportunities.
Yeah, and as you said, you have many constituents, not just the consumer. It's important for you to rally the bottlers and the wholesalers, and part of buying those sexy TV shows is that you have merchandising and something to juice the marketplace with, right?
You got it.
That's an output.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So, one of the interesting things, I don't mean to harken back to the upfronts, but they're going on this week, and one of the changes I've seen is data and programmatic, and outputs are a big part of the conversation now. They kind of do it often in an underhanded or deprecating way, but they're introducing their own technology now. The best example we saw was probably this week. Viacom did a partnership with American Express where they're going to integrate American Express's, actual, purchasing data power that they have into audience targeting. Dave Morgan's platform, I'll speak for him a little bit, is all about taking the science of the actual consumers you want to reach and putting them into better audience targeting for TV. We're kind of in the infancy stages of that, but the idea here is that even traditional media are now moving more into output mentality. Do you think this will shift from old style Nielsen GRPs and impressions and CPMs into some other way of looking at even traditional media?
I think, yeah, I think it goes back to kind of that first point I made. Yes, eventually, but not until, we can tie and understand kind of the value of these metrics in terms of outcomes, right? So, we are making kind of progress there, but I think from a CPG standpoint, we still face those challenges. And the fact is that you need a metric in order to measure, right? So right now, that's kind of the best metric I would arguably say that we have, and then although that metric is often being threatened by kind of the advent of, ad tech and the, multi-touch attribution, and be able to kind of find more from it. So, I think for now, yes.
Okay. So, in the old days, you just have to deal with all of those media middlemen pitching you and trying to get your attention. Now you have to deal with all these ad tech middlemen and all these other new parts of the supply chain. How is that affecting your ability to pay attention to what matters? The fact that you now have to look at so many new different pieces of the mix that, you probably didn't, in the old days, the equivalent of your role wouldn't have to look at an algorithm type processor, but today that's part of your job, right? How are you managing the volume of options that you have to consider now to make your job manageable?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, and I think it's a tough one that kind of we balance with on a regular basis. So here's what I would say is that when we if you think about kind of our cycle, right, as a large CPG, we're procuring a ton of things, whether it be from kind of beer bottles to marketing technology, right? Meaning that, we have a pretty robust procurement process. So the thought being is that, we might get picked for, hundreds of thousands of different ad technology providers and of the such, but there's going to be very, very few, that we'll actually move on with and kind of bring internally. And from my standpoint, kind of the way I always think about it is a few things, right? One is that, because we're bringing them on internally and they're going to become more of a strategic partner, I think a DMP is a good example. One of the key things that I will always look at, and this is speaking for myself, is culture of the company, right? Because, there are many different companies out there that could have a kind of similar different ad tech products, but I think that, it's also a cultural aspect. So if you guys just, if we don't gel with the company in terms of where we're going from a long-term perspective, I think, that doesn't work out. And the other thing that, I think I look for is that it is, to be honest, a little bit of a buyer's market to some degree, especially in the ad tech space. And, one of the things is that we'll often get pitched, saying, we'll be able to do X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z. And my challenge often is, okay, if you're willing to do X, Y, and Z, and you feel confident in your technology, and I understand completely it's a technology, but put some skin in the game with us, to back up that you're able to deliver X, Y, and Z. And I think, those are, but I think those are two kind of softer subjects that we look at. And then also the last part is to more of those kind of technical features. I think that, our agency MediaCom, they've done an amazing job of, they have a lot of that expertise and they're able to help guide us kind of in those overall decisions. So I think that, from our perspective, that's a good sign as well, because some of the, we just can't do a full analysis of the whole DMP, infrastructure and go into, or DSPs and go into every single DSP's queries per second or stuff like that, right? So I think having the, media agencies, flex that strategic muscle for us is very helpful.
I find it fascinating the way you describe the supply chain and having a cultural fit and gelling with them and liking them, because that has always been a part of the media process, which is the relationships you have with the vendors and the supply. And it's nice to see that human part has not completely gone away, that there has to be a fit. So in the earlier panel and discussion we had in the last panel, I didn't really get to ask the follow-up question, so if you don't mind, I'd like to ask it to you, which is, in the example that was given about putting that team together and having it being directed by the customer satisfaction team, right, drove the outcome and the strategy, and everybody was on the same page, which is good. But one of the things I wonder is, do brands and marketers really understand the customer experience anymore? Because they have so much data, but a lot of the data you're looking at is the customer experience as it relates to your brand, to Budweiser or Michelob or whatever. How do you force yourself and your organization to think more about the total user experience? Because the reason they're blocking ads, the reason they're tuning out, isn't because they don't like Budweiser, it's because they're getting too much stuff thrown at them. So how do you get a more complete picture of the consumer in their total and try and fulfill it?
Yeah, so I think that to me it's really two main things. So, the first is, you kind of mentioned intermediaries and kind of, the supply chain along the process. And I think, what and this, I'm speaking kind of more personally here, is that what I've noticed is oftentimes the closer I am to the final advertisement, the more understanding I have of the final kind of user experience, right? So the more people that are in the middle, kind of the further you are away from the advertisement, and then, the further away you can kind of feel of what's going on and kind of understand that data, because you could have a lot of data, but you also kind of need the context of what's going on. And if you have so many people in the middle, it's a little bit harder to understand that context. That's number one. Number two, I think, is, it's a skill set within marketers to think like a consumer, right? You need to have empathy and you need to understand what's going on. And I think, us as, Anheuser-Busch, that's something as an organization that we have, because we understand that, we're in a place that we're selling an amazing product that, that's beer, that's fun, that brings people together. So the fact is that, the user experience for us is kind of utmost importance because to some degree it speaks to our product over time.
Steve, do we have time for audience Q&A, or should we just go? Yeah? Okay. Are there any questions for Johnny before we wrap it up? It's a gentleman here.
Sorry. So in your space, people are very brand loyal to their beverage of choice. So looking at the machine, really, how do you communicate your differentiators to drive conversion in your space, specifically to A and B?
Yeah, good question. So, from our end, most of the time, and it's actually really funny because, well, there are two things, right? So first is, as AB, we subscribe to the idea of always bringing in as many new consumers as possible, kind of, and reaching as many people as possible, just because that's the nature of our product, right? So when we get to talk, when we're starting to talk about things like very, very, very advanced targeting, we start to run into issues because the CPMs will just, skyrocket, and from our end, we really need to understand what is that differentiating factor, based on that audience that message is going to resonate to them a little bit more, right? So that's, I think, the first aspect of it when it comes to targeting. The second aspect is just the nature of our business. It's a very emotionally driven business. So coming from the yogurt world where, everything where, Lighting Fit Greek is, 80 calories per 5.3 ounces, and that's legal. That's ingrained that into my head, the 5.3 ounces. But we're beer, where we're a lot more kind of emotional. I think those are obviously the key differentiators of giving those consumers an overall experience, and then that kind of speaks to that previous question, of our product is part of the experience, right? So meaning if they have a bad ad experience, it's just a nature of they're not going to have a very good emotional experience tied to it.
I wanted to draft off of Joe's question.
Draft.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, draft. I was getting the pun.
That's
Okay.
it.
I wanted to draft off of Joe's question about that sort of more holistic view of the consumer, and maybe I have a sort of a ham-handed question is, with all of this technology, which we hear is supposed to give us a more 360 view of the consumer journey and a more holistic view of how consumers are making decisions, do you know more than you knew 5 years ago about how somebody decides to buy a beer?
Yes, I think ultimately, I think a lot of that is often obviously driven by just the advancement of our insights department and the advancements of just general insights technology. But I also think that we do know, Facebook's a good example, is that we do have a better understanding of what's going to drive kind of more relevance in Facebook, right? So we know certain specific creative things that might be a little bit surprising that would say, hey, this is what's going to drive, an ultimate decision for a consumer. And what this comes with is obviously a lot of test and learn and have a longer process, So I would say my dream is to be, a retailer, like Gap or J. Crew for a day where I'm able to measure everything because I feel like I could do 100 tests a day. But, in our end, I think that, being in a 3-tier system is a little bit trickier.
Okay, maybe one last wrap-up question, which is, so one of the dangers I see with the ability of this fast, powerful data and technology is we could go right, like you said, for retailers, right to what's going on every day, revenues, sales, conversions, those kinds of KPIs. Are we in danger as an industry, not just for retail or beer, but in general, of throwing the baby out with the bathwater and giving up on the softer metrics that created a great brand like Budweiser, soon to be America? Those were built up over a long time. We called it brand equity, and it seems like most of the technology and the data and the KPIs are measuring short-term effects. So do you have any concerns or advice about that?
Yeah, so I think that it's something that we grapple with all the time, right? And it's also something that obviously, many companies do. And the fact is there's no easy answer to it, but, if you just think, kind of in the long term, is that if we're advertising a product that ultimately has no equity and, we could throw as many impressions as we want, but ultimately, in the long run, that's not going to move the needle. So, I was kind of saying earlier is that I always think of it, my always good example is kind of the clickbait of Facebook, right? So sometimes, at least for me on my Facebook feed, crazy news articles, that, will beg you to click. And then you'll get get all those clicks like that. But then on my end, from the longer term perspective, I've obviously been taught, not to love that brand, not to enjoy that brand, because I didn't get that overall value exchange. So I think it's that balancing act, and by no means do we ever want to be that kind of marketer. So ultimately, we always have to be conscious of kind of balancing that short-term sales with that kind of longer-term equity, and it's a conversation we honestly have all the time. It's a really, really big conversation because it ties to just kind of overall our investment and plans.
Okay. Well, you've convinced me that beer culture will drink strategy, so I want to thank you for shedding some light on this. Come back in a year or two so that you can tell us how this transition is continuing.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Joe. And now we're going to drill into a more specific discussion about a more specific platform and technology. How does it work? How do you creating a DMP? How does it work within the organization? And how does it raise a whole set of questions about data and data within an organization, how it's shared, not only internally, but with partners, how it's protected? To take up some of these questions, we won't cover all of them. Let me bring up our, where are we? Where's Dan? Dan Hodges. Dan is an old friend of MediaPost. He's the CEO and founder of Consumers in Motion, a consultancy that works both with businesses and with governments on their overall brand strategy and contact with consumers. Dan goes way back with us, back from the day when he was one of the senior executives at InPocket, which you may recall was one of the earliest buys of Nokia when it started getting into the mobile advertising space, one of the old pros, especially in mobile, but also in brand marketing. Please welcome Dan and his panel.
Okay, so before we get started, a show of hands of how many people were train challenged this morning? Aha. Okay. Well, we have a very interesting panel. We have the travel category and the financial category. So please meet Michael Turcotte from Chase, and please meet Brian Shedd, who is with OpenKey, but most famously is the brother of Brent. So there you go. So in just thinking about the panel, the question I had really is, does any brand have any option but to build a DMP? And there are sort of 8 facts that I came up with that I thought would be interesting for the room as we frame this. The first thing is that we're all facing decreased attention spans. Attention spans have gone from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. So if you're a marketer, consider that. The second is that depending on your demographic, between 60 and 85% of all content now is consumed on a smartphone. So there's a factor, and around 30 to 40% of commerce right now is done on a mobile phone, and we'll get into some facts when we speak with Brian. All of this is being transacted on a screen which is the size of a credit card, and we know that the fastest growing demographic is 55 plus. So a lot of the DMP is only effective, I think, if it's being integrated into the customer journey, and technology continues to rocket ahead. We have coming next. We have artificial intelligence. So when the AI will be used in the customer journey to anticipate your next move versus what you did last year. So anyway, getting started, we'll start with Michael. And I thought the last panelist had some interesting things. I want to build on some of what he said. But from your point of view, Michael, where was Chase 18 months ago? Where are you now? And then where do you expect to go? So.
I guess clarifying what you say with regards to a DMP or just in general?
Thank you. So regards to DMP, regard to digital marketing, and how that's included in your customer stack.
Yeah, so actually about 24 or 36 months ago, we had a DMP. We worked with Blue Kai at the time. And we had limited use of it integrated correctly as well as the capabilities are today, and I'll get to that in a second, coupled with the technology back then, and ultimately the value of a DMP was pretty much third-party data, certainly back 18 to 36 months ago. Where we are today, we're in the middle of RFPing and at the tail end of deciding on a re-engaging with a data management platform. Over the last 12, about 18 months ago, we sunset the DMP relationship. We moved exclusively to an onboarder. and just to be able to use an onboarder to ingest our data in and then push it out. And we had a lot of success with that, but we also met with some ceilings, limitations in terms of speed to market and just a couple other factors, which really brings the value of a DMP back into the fold. So that's why we re-RFP'd. We're in the middle of that stage right now. But again, the architecture, I think, is really important to answer your earlier statement, which is the difference now is a better organization of our data coming in, not just .com, but also all of our offline data. And as you can imagine, as a financial firm, we are a data company basically by practice. So the organization of the data in and also the capability from the data out in our analytics environment. So those are the two things that have dramatically changed over the last 18 months, which I think will make the value of a DMP that much more for us.
So it seems like the last 18 months you're sort of organizing and sort of getting your infrastructure, your sort of ABCs. Yep. So that's 18 months. So where are you right now? And then where are you expecting to, where do you want to be in 18 months?
Yeah, so right now, like I said, we are, we hope to have a DMP on, sort of operational by mid-third quarter. And then, hopefully reap the benefits of that. I think go from, call it Q4 to next end of 2017. I think where we hope to be is true notion of personalization at scale is where our mission and our focus is right now in marketing. And so the DMP and rather the outputs of the DMP are going to feed our internal decision engine, our internal marketing profile that we're using for email and site personalization, and not just paid media. So that's again the other factor is how do we use the technology more than just delivering a banner ad or a mobile in-app ad. So that's our view of 18 months from now, also coupled with speed to market to be able to go, and I think I'll steal the term from Brian O'Kelly at AppNexus, who's sort of saying programmatic is dead, but programmable is the sort of new thing. And so being able to do action on triggers that are happening instantaneously. So I know that a user took an action right this second, maybe offline, i.e. swipe their card. What is the message that I can deploy next based on their next touch point with us? So that's, we want to really improve our speed to market, whether that's real time versus near real time. That'll be seen, yep.
Okay. And then Brian, so in the travel category, it's seen a lot of change in the last 10 years, and it keeps changing. So what's interesting about the category is that IHG, which had about $1 million worth of bookings in hotels on mobile phones, in 2011 now has about approximately $1 billion in bookings. And what's interesting about the Orbis business model is that 24 hours prior to booking is around 40% of their volume, and their volume is around $1,000 an order. And when you look at the appeal of your app to millennials, they've also become very intolerant. So with the Uber and OpenTable effect and combining with the attention span, we sort of want things within that defined period of time. So so I was telling Brian before the panel, I was in Las Vegas over the weekend, and when I got to my line to check in, there were 50 people ahead of me, and I thought I was going to lose my mind, So anyway, so why did you come up with the idea of OpenKey? What are you seeing in the marketplace? And because I'm sure there's a learning you could share with the group here.
Well, I hope I could, I wish I could take credit for coming up with the idea of OpenKey, I really do. But actually the genesis of OpenKey as an app, and for those of you who are not familiar with what OpenKey is software that allows you to use your mobile phone as your hotel room key. So it's a symbol key or a digital key application. So the concept for OpenKey actually was created by, or was come up by, is owned by 12 real estate investment trusts in the hotel industry. So, but that all started with one, and the CEO of that very large company that owns just shy of 200 hotels was frustrated by what he saw on the consumer side, and they have representation of all the major stay brands within their portfolio. So the offerings in the mobile key space that a couple of the major stay brands were putting forth were very friendly to the brand and not very friendly to the consumer. So, and believe it or not, owners of hotels are far more closely aligned with you and I, the consumer, than the brands, you know, than the Hiltons and the Marriotts of the world. So, at any rate, that was the original genesis of OpenKey as a company, and the functionality of OpenKey that Dan is referring to allows you to receive a pre-arrival email from your hotel if it's obviously an OpenKey partner. You can download a link to put the app on your phone. The hotel can then assign you a room, send you your digital key. You can check in and just skip the desk entirely, right? And go straight to your room, use your phone as your room key, and you eliminate that whole front desk issue. So aside from some significant cost savings that you can imagine that presents for operators, it also frees the front desk agents up to do a far better job of serving you as a customer, because now they can deal with issues such as, you know, the heater in my room doesn't work, or I want more towels, or where is the fitness room, instead of standing in that line of 50 people to get your chance, right, to tackle those issues. So, and that being the case, you can imagine how it gives millennials that are very digitally savvy more control over their stay. And I think that's where certainly the hotel industry that we're in, that's where it's all going, is how much more empowerment can we give hotel guests over their stay so that they get to control what that experience is like.
So just to show of hands, how many people booked have booked on mobile phone in the last 6 months? Okay, then how many people booked hotel? And then airline? Oh, okay. So, so Michael, I thought it was interesting your like your reporting structure at Chase, like who you're reporting into and how that works, and arbiter. So, at that level, what sort of conversations you're having with your marketing team, your customer management team?
Yeah, so the way we're structured, we have, so our marketing team led by our CMO is essentially a center of excellence. We serve all the different lines of business that fall underneath, so the product categories within credit card and consumer bank and mortgage. And so we actually almost act as an internal agency for the different marketing teams within each line of business. Where our responsibility is as a COE is to certainly help that specific line of business achieve their stated goal. So there was a conversation in the prior panel about long-term versus short-term impacts and KPIs. Most of what the businesses are focused on is short-term. I need credit cards, I need balance growth in checking, I need people to transact more digitally. And so our role is to help build marketing plans, both media and creative, that achieve those short-term goals. While as a long-term goal, we're still building the Chase brand. So the team I'm partnered with, I actually have function. One is in digital technologies and digital platforms, one is in branding. So again, you can imagine that, you know, from a branding standpoint, that group is responsible for creative and all of the sort of brand aspects of JP Morgan Chase as a whole, coupled with the individual line of the business. Whereas on the digital platform side, it's really kind of this conversation today, which is enabling our partners, whether it's internal or external agencies, to do a better job driving those immediate business goals. And then being able to mitigate waste and just learn quickly and move on to the next task. So that's sort of the luxury of being in a COE, but also obviously has its challenges, given that, you know, we don't necessarily own budget or control budget specifically in the media space. So we're really trying to do our best to educate and evangelize the lines of business and have them sort of trust that what we're bringing to them is worthy of the investment that we're asking.
Brian, one of the great things about startups is, you know, there's a business premise for every startup, and then when you mark, you find certain things that you are maybe weren't thinking about. So, and you mentioned that the hotel owners are really very vested in OpenKey. So when the hotel owners are starting to get all this data, how does that inform them in terms of like delighting their hotel?
Well, like a lot of other industries, probably most of the industries that you all are in, it's essentially it's all about the finances, right? So one of the core reasons that OpenKey was created is because hotels more and more are seeing customers booking through online travel agents, right? So 70% of any guests check out a hotel made their booking online through one of the major booking sites. That's when you think about that, you know, you're providing your credit card information to the online booking site, your communication information. Typically, the only information that gets transmitted to the hotel is your first and last name and the room preference that you book, and then you check in. So, you know, if you or I run an online travel, then it's communication to ourselves, right? And sharing only what we really need to with the hotel. Well, as a hotel owner, that's not so bueno, because you would like to have more overriding people become, you know, a consumer books on an online travel agent site, the to that online travel agent, it's a figure. And if y'all have been, you know, paying attention to space much, all of the big hotel chains are providing sense for you to book direct with on their websites. It's because the commissions are becoming a major line item in all of their budget, right? So one of the advantages that OpenKey offers these operators is when you as a guest check in and leverage OpenKey, we can track communication information, your address, things of that nature that complete guest folio for the hotel now, right? So they're able then to use that information to meet with you directly next time, saving them sometimes 30% of what you were going to space. There's a financial motivation behind, you know, pretty much everything, and that's the financial motivation for hotels to adopt OpenKey.
Yeah, Michael, we talked about the amount of time you spend educating the various teams, your research team, your marketing teams. What is the but how are you working with that? Educating your internal team, the finance marketing team, and making the DMP part of a foundational approach to the market?
Yeah, no, great question. So education is probably my number one mission right now, and educating about benefits that technology the DMP can bring, but also an even more important sort of notion of audience discovery. You know, the market out there, most of them don't know what they don't know. So if you, and I would argue most organizations are the same, where you have brilliant marketers on one side and brilliant data scientists on another, and rarely do they speak together. So my job is really to bridge that gap, is to bring in the data science teams and help the marketers uncover and ask questions. You know, what is your target audience? It's not adults 25 to 54, 18 to 49, that's irrelevant. Rather, all right, I'm trying to target someone that made a repeat purchase at this specific vendor, this merchant, or that has a propensity to buy somewhere, swipe their card, or buy a mortgage. So it's about empowering the marketers to ask better questions internally and externally to the agencies to say, here's really my target. Now let's sort of back that up and say, what is the right channel strategy, investment mix, creative strategy around that? So using the DMP as sort of the catalyst to fuel the rest of the marketing plans. And so that's you know, sort of mission critical number one. The second one, related to the financial aspect of it, is as a marketer, our media budget has gone down the last 5 years, and that's not a bad thing per se, as long as that we're making that investment smarter for us. So if I know that the ceiling, I don't need to spend $10 million to reach out to people, and so you're starting to build more investment strategies, frequency and metrics at a fraction of the cost. Because ultimately it's going to pay dividends in reducing our cost, and just to be clear, reducing our higher CPM if that return, whether it's reaching someone that I can't reach value equation. And that's honestly the harder part because the industry as a whole doesn't transact that way. So really trying to get everyone away from thinking low cost and high value.
Also, to you, Brian, you collecting data, you got the hotels that are sitting there. When you start thinking of your users, in terms of maybe going to local, sort of evolves.
This came up in an earlier panel. Collect information, right? We not collect information for what people do when they're actually at the property. Tests link to from that particular market, able to tell the hotel is. So we capture a lot of it. And what we found is we provide all of that data to the hotels, and we're not seeing the hotels using put out a communication to you around, hey, direct to the market. I think it speaks to the challenge just internally from a perspective around these hotels typically don't have big, robust marketing departments that have data scientists that are able to really create specific algorithm things. Give them all of that data, they are just not in a place to use it, right? So that we're focused almost entirely on just dealing with our installation. Right, was a place looking on probably 12 to 20 months. We'll probably be adding some personnel to help tumble those numbers for hotels and close to that information because from an evolution standpoint, I think probably space just kind of.
Michael, how do you stay current and do you blind spots? I'll give you an blind spot. Uber test marketed in San Francisco and San Francisco has the dump there. They can sort of paying attention, they probably notice that Brian who went is not there. So what so there have been someone at our company so
the obvious that we usually run financial as a whole is recognize that as fintech, right? Because they are, whether you want to consider them frenemies or competitors or however, that is historically been the big blind spot for services. We are really personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of Chase, and financial technology companies have been able to do in terms of adapting to user demand and saying, hey, there's a need for someone to have quick access to capital or manage your investment, one on a customer need and stayed ahead of that and really quick speed to market and getting a product out. So that's where I think for us as an entire business is focusing on that, the fact doing space, and how do we either partner with them or how do we build and much more. From a marketing and specifically data point, for me, it's like it's following key thought leaders on some meet here. So that know as a space we believe in what we know we have asset-wise, versus someone goes, oh, this competitor or this financial firm or this PG, but each client has a different business challenge. So it's clearly not just China, just because everyone else is doing it.
Innovator. To that ways to innovate.
Anybody that knows, so it's a question, and it's fun that OpenKey's been around since November-ish of 2014. So we're really a new company, and I'm actually, and the guy who runs the mobile key, universal app, fantastic. That's not really my challenge. He says my challenge is I don't have any hotels that have the kind of digital lock that you need to have in order to use a mobile key, right? So he said, if you can solve that challenge, then we're money. You've got a real market. Well, it just so happens that those digital locks aren't cheap, right? So what's interesting is the conversation that we're having with a lot of hotels and owners and management companies has shifted toward where, because of our financial backing, thank goodness, we've actually created a pool of funds that we now go to hotel groups and say, listen, we're able to finance the purchase of these Bluetooth low energy locks as part of a 3-year contract with OpenKey, because these guys just don't have that money in their capital budgets. So we're able to turn it from a CapEx into an operating expense, and believe it or not, we probably look more like a lock financing company right now than a mobile technology firm. But it's about addressing that need in the market, right? We didn't even realize that that was
like,
Yeah, it's a question I get all the time, and the reason, the way that OpenKey stands out, and not to bore everybody with the specifics of my industry, but there's probably 5 major lock manufacturers, believe it or not. Whatever hotel you check into next week is probably going to have a lock from one of these 5 manufacturers on the door. And OpenKey has, from our genesis, the position that we've taken is we want to be a universal solution. So we want you to be able to use your phone to open the digital version of any of those major lock manufacturers, because our owners own a lot of different hotels, and those hotels have locks from all the major manufacturers in it, right? So as a consumer, you're able to just have one app on your phone, and it doesn't matter what the brand of hotel, what the lock on the door is, you're going to be able to use that same app and open all those doors. Brands, not so much. So if you're working for Hilton, you want to use Mobile Key as an incentive to get consumers to join your Hilton loyalty program. And by virtue of that, you can mandate to all of your Hilton franchisees that they have to install a particular kind of lock, right? You've got that power as a brand. So most of the major stay brands that are active in the mobile key space have solutions that really only work with one lock manufacturer. So it's not consumer friendly, but I get it how it's easier for the brands to do that. And that's really how OpenKey sort of stands out as more of the consumer-facing solution. I'm confident that over time we will wear down the major stay brands, and they'll just say, you know what, it's a lot easier to just implement the OpenKey software development kit and not even deal with the lock issues from the franchisees, because a lot of these franchisees don't want you telling them what they have to do, right? Like that's anything new. So
just as I guess getting close to the end here, some suggestions for the group here. We have brands like AB and Gap here, and you know the DMP is relatively new in the last 5-10 years phenomenon. And what you were talking about, Michael, was you come on board, you've got to get all the data in one format that can be used, and then you need to start getting some rapid insights because you don't want to be on the wrong side of mint, Yep. So, and then you also want to be monitoring the pace. So how do you, for the group here, maybe some suggestions on, because I would imagine it's a phased process.
Yeah. Under promise and over deliver. I mean, that's honestly a lot of the research shows. Most customers of a DMP have said it's failed to meet up to their expectations, and I think the bar has been set too high. That the DMP is going to solve all my problems, going to create all these sales and new customers, and it's going to reduce blah blah blah. Not really true. It's a platform, yes, but if you're not putting the work in to set it up correctly, and you don't have the back end to be able to support the data coming out and interpret that, then it's just a dumb pipe. And so I think it's for those that are just marketers in the room, bring in your analytics teams, bring in your data scientist teams, bring in your finance teams, because ultimately you need them to buy into it and help ultimately sell that story. So it is truly a tribal effort on our end. It's not just being led by the Digital Platform Technologies group. It's being led as a coordinated effort across multiple different groups that all have a say in how it gets set up and ultimately what the value created is.
So I think you may have said it before, but what % of your time are you spending internally, sort of educating the data folks and the marketing and?
Yeah, it's about 70% of my day is probably focused on education, 30% on actual work or building implementation. So 70 and some cases 75%.
Great. And so Brian, if you're sitting in front of the hotel franchise group of America, what suggestions would you have for them regarding your platform, or maybe if you don't want to frame it, put a different color on it, maybe what are your suggestions for the room? The two different answers, right?
Well, in a lot of the same challenges with the DMP space, right? Not only is the DMP only as valuable as the information that you put into it, but it's also only as valuable as the amount of time and effort you put towards making that work. And OpenKey is still early days in terms of the utility of what hoteliers are getting out of it. The upside is that every day it is creating the kinds of information and data storage on consumer usage behaviors that they can always use in the future to improve their advertising efforts, to improve their targeted marketing, to improve their offerings at the hotel, to deliver smarter, more relevant offers to you while you're on property, because they know, for instance, you have yet to try the restaurant based on the fact that the insight that we've been able to provide them. So I think data overall, obviously the more data that gets consumed and then analyzed and fed back is going to make life better for all of us. It's a little freakish to know that so much of your behavioral data is being captured and being analyzed and being used, but the promise, I think, of DMPs, the promise of platforms, mobile platforms like OpenKey, is to improve our overall experience through less aggravation, more relevancy in messages, and just improving our overall experience. So fingers crossed, that's the direction it goes.
Let's open it up for questions from our audience for our two marketers.
Has anybody ever used a mobile key? A good experience?
Yeah, and actually, I was going to ask you,
Hang on. Let the mic get to you.
Yeah, I'm Ray Krause, I'm with Axiom. It's not clear how much data you collect and how you get your data. I mean, from my point of view, when I did it, you got my contact information and the hotel I was staying at, room number, but that doesn't mean anything. What other data do you collect, and how do you do it? How do you know that I've been to the restaurant? How do you know what I did with the dry bar, or the hotel bar, mini bar?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've used the mini bar. We use geofencing around a property, and OpenKey is an always-on kind of app. So we use location awareness in order to track where you go and what you do within the property. So there's a lot of doors at a hotel, and all of the doors within a hotel that has OpenKey are all digital locks. They have to be. So we're able literally to tell the hotelier exactly where you went while you were on property, when you left, when you came back, how often you went into your room and left. So there's some inference that's implied there as well, but I think I'll choose the word amazed. You'll be amazed at how much information we have about you.
Well, to pick up on that and extend it to a point that someone made from an earlier panel, is a lot of this data is aimed at being able to tell marketers what you did, but not necessarily why you did it. And I'm curious if both of you could respond to that gap in terms of where you see it and what you do to fill that gap when you have all this technology telling you so many whats without the whys.
Sure, we can all infer why Glenn spends so much time in the minibar, but I don't know that we'll be correct. We can just infer that. Just kidding. So
you don't know if you should send him an AA notice, or he just has a lot of friends in the room, right?
We're not going to auto-enroll him in a program, I'm saying. But yeah, no, I think that's the challenge. Is we'll always make educated guesses about why people are doing things, and I think over time and over looking at a lot of use cases, we'll get very, very good at coming up with the reasons why you're doing certain things. You know, for instance, when we can see that a consumer is leaving a hotel around 5 and returning around 7, we're going to infer that you chose to go eat off property, right? I don't know that that's what you did, but I'm guessing that we're going to get pretty good at that. So I think it's going to be, we're going to generate the whys looking at a volume of information over a period of time.
I think, you know, it's if you take it through the lens of the customer, the consumer, the technologies that are out there, even Brian's technology or you know, audio content recognition, great for marketers, but has potential implications, both government and privacy and ethical. So what I think we need to do as an industry is, it's less about the why, it's about, is the customer, the consumer, does the consumer know that OpenKey or a Chase mobile app or Uber or whatever it is knows exactly where you are at any given time? And are they okay with that? And they may be. But if you're not providing them the choice to either opt out or say, hey, yes, here's what you can do with that information, I don't want to be on the wrong side of customer privacy with that. So we're taking a very, very close look at some of these technologies, especially in the addressable TV space or data-driven, which is, you know, the ability to follow someone multiple screens. The jury's still out as to whether that's going to last or not. So I don't want to deviate from your question, but it's something that, frankly, we're grappling with a lot. Is a lot of good implications for marketers, a lot of concerns from privacy on this side.
So it's not, the why is there, but maybe more important is the should.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think it's also important with any mobile apps now, if your app is an always-on app, it's actually, I believe it's either mandated or it's getting there, where you get a pop-up that informs you as the consumer that these are the apps that are always on your phone, and you have the option of either toggling that off or allowing that to stay on. So,
Dan, Michael, Brian, thank you very much.
Thank you guys, appreciate it.
Great stuff. And let me ask Catherine and our next discussion group to come up, because I think they draft very well off of this one, because you'll notice that both a lot about that direct email. And one of the things we keep finding, all of the technology and sophistication and all of the new touch points that are available, again and again, email and messaging, that final direct point of contact between brand and consumer, remains incredibly powerful. And as I think we're going to hear, also becomes a sophisticated part, a centerpiece of a lot, can be connected to and made a centerpiece of a lot of the technologies that we're talking about today. Because ultimately, a lot of the stuff that we've been discussing really aims towards personalization and using machinery to make the connection between brand and consumer more human rather than more machine-like. To talk about the role of messaging, email in particular, but also all forms of messaging. We have taking the lead on this session, Catherine Ogburn, who is the Director of Strategy at Ready State. She has worked with brands like Google, Intel, General Motors, and Microsoft. Before coming to Ready State, was at MRM, McCann, FCB, and worked for a while at McKinsey. Please welcome Catherine in our discussion session.
Hi. So that was a really awesome data platform discussion and went pretty deep in my head as a little bit, but we're going to back up and talk about how we could use some of this information within the field of email and messaging. A little bit of focus on messaging, a little bit of focus on personalization, also around like how do we use this tech and how does it work best. So with that, let me turn it over and let these guys introduce themselves. Okay.
Good morning, I'm Mike Ritchie. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of Digital Fusion. We're a Denver-based agency. We serve retail brands like Rack Room Shoes, Off-Broadway Shoes, Smart and Final, as well as casual dining brands like Boston Market, Smashburger, and what have you, principally focused on helping them unify all their digital channels.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Wasilius. I oversee all of digital for Bullmore AMF. We are the largest owner-operator of bowling alleys in the world. We own over 300 locations across the US, Canada, and Mexico. The reason why you see so many Twitter handles up there is that we have a portfolio of brands. We are a company that has been built up on mergers and acquisitions, so we have quite a lot of different brands in our portfolio, and oversee everything from email to display to mobile to social media. So yeah.
All right, great. So first question is the question that always comes up: is email dead? It's been around forever. Everything else is cooler. Why are we still here?
Is email dead? So you could probably Google search "is email dead" and you'll probably find a conference from like 5, 6, 7 years ago when people first started saying it, and people are still saying it, which is really surprising to me. I don't think that email is dead, and I don't think it ever will be in the near-term future. There may be other marketing channels that are cooler or fancier or bright and shiny and new. A lot of people think social media, and listen, I oversee social media. I love it, and I think it's really fun to work in. But the fact of the matter is, email is always going to be your workhorse. And I wouldn't just say the workhorse of the digital marketing world, I would say the workhorse of the marketing world. I mean, you look at your return on investment when it comes to email, no other channel can provide that kind of return. Not display advertising, not mobile advertising, not video. So it's really kind of the backbone of, at least I've actually been on the vendor technology, data side, and now I'm on the client side. But I think it's kind of the backbone of any good, strong marketing program. And email was the first true one-to-one channel. We're getting really fancy in the world of paid social, in the world of display. But I think email really blazed a number of trails in that area, and I think it's also a really trusted channel.
Yeah, and just to echo on that, completely agree. I think that it's far from dead. In fact, it's not only the workhorse. When you compare it from an ROI standpoint to all the rest of the digital mediums, if you combine social, mobile, and display together, it still outperforms them. So those numbers, if you will, in aggregate, still pale in comparison to email. I think what's dead is batch and blast email. So the consumer's appetite for being targeted as a member of a mass segment experiment, if you will, is over. They're tired of that. They expect you to be relevant and personalized and to use data to inform both the content and the experience with email. Where our brands are doing that, they're consistently driving higher returns than any other of their digital mediums. The new toys, so to speak, are really, really cool. I spent 15 years in the world of mobile, and God knows I've got a passion for that, and I've helped develop apps and what have you. But again, when it comes down to being a workhorse, to driving return, to driving conversion, there's nothing like email as long as it's designed correctly and we're using data to inform the experience.
So maybe let's drill down a little bit on the idea of personalization and how you can avoid the batch and blast aspects of email.
I mean, it all comes down to data. You can't personalize a message if you don't know anything about your consumer. So there's a number of different ways to attain more information about your consumer. You could ask them for it. The problem with that is there's always going to be a low single-digit response for asking a person to give you more information if you're not incentivizing them. There's another difference between self-reported data and inferred data, and a lot of times people consciously are being honest and they think they're answering certain questions correctly, but if you actually look at their behavior is mostly or many times different. So sometimes you might think that you are a consumer of X, but you might not even realize that you actually prefer Y because that's what you keep going back to and that's what your behavior indicates. From an email world, it's tough because well, it's a double-edged sword. So, there's canned spam, there's regulations around email, which has been very helpful in the world of email because, it's taken the free Viagra.com spammers of the world, mostly, off the table. But in the other sense, you can't just, it's a slippery slope, but, you really shouldn't be buying shady lists or names or sending to people necessarily raise their hand and want your product. So, getting data can be tough. There's other ways of going about it in terms of working with large data companies and doing data hygiene and data pens, which I'm actually a proponent of because these people are your customers. They've raised their hands and they've said, I want to purchase in your advertising point of view and have a dialogue with you. And I think that when you work with, data pens and enriching the data that you have on your database, it's kind of doing the customer a favor in terms of, isn't technology supposed to make our lives easier? So it's really annoying when I get, an email, it's like, can you please fill out this survey? We promise it's only 15 minutes of your time. Like, dude, 15 minutes of my time is a lot. I mean, sometimes I'm too busy to eat lunch during a work day. So, if I can just be smart and say, oh, she used her American Express at this transaction, we've taken her data and we know that she is this, Outlook.com address and she has this Twitter handle and this Facebook, and we can put everything together and say, hey, by the way, would you like to purchase this product that's right in tune with what I want? I think it's more of a service, and I know that was spoken to earlier today, and if I'm in the market for something and I'm looking for something and I see an advertisement for it, a lot of times it's more of a service to me and I'm like, thank you, I was looking for this, thank you for this reminder.
So this whole notion of personalization is really interesting to me. It's become one of the greatest buzzwords in our industry, and unfortunately, it means different things to different people. To some of the marketers that we work with at a native level, they believe that personalization is as simple as knowing my name and personalizing the email with it. It becomes subject line personalization. Think about it to one say, Jackie did some of the data streams, and the key data streams are preference data, so self-declared user data, behavioral data, or one off the analytics that off our website and the consumer's engagement with either content or products, goods, or services there. And then finally, and most importantly, transactional data. It's that last data stream that tells us more about the consumer than anything else. If I understand your purchase behavior, your pricing propensity, and I can use that to inform offers in what I send to you, you are far more likely to act and redeem on them. In fact, that's how we drive higher ROI from email. We make it more relevant consumer, we personalize dynamic content and what have you. So when we get to this notion of true one-to-one personalization, invariably it means breaking down data silos and being able to tie into your CRM instance, into your loyalty database, into your e-commerce platform, and more importantly into the customer's transaction history, which typically is coming out of CRM. If we can build that unified view of the consumer, then we can truly drive what we're calling one-to-one personalization. Absent of that, it's nothing more than name personalization.
Thank you. That's great. And then when you think about the emails that you're sending out and the personalization that you're doing in order to drive effectiveness is what you're kind of thinking. How do you think about effectiveness? How do you think about ROI? And how does that change the level of personalization that you want to invest in?
Sure. When you go down the technology world, I think that everyone on the brand side experiences a little bit of FOMO when it comes to technology tools and fancy machinery and algorithms that are out there, and it's like, what could I be doing that I'm not already doing in terms of my customer? There's an investment behind that. So it might cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement, a really true data platform that's taking all the data from, here and your habits and tying that in and messaging that person, but it's also taking into consideration the ROI behind that. So, I think I would recommend to brands to kind of start small and use the data that you have and to selectively append that data and always look to, how am I driving incremental sales based on what I would have been doing without this extra layer of technology. Because it's very easy to sign on a ton of vendors and to just buy a Ferrari in your garage, but you realize how to drive stick. So it's like, what am I going to do with this vehicle if there's anyone behind the wheel who is as knowledgeable to use it? And through the last conversation with the DMP, a lot of people who use these bigger technologies, they spend the majority of their time just instructing people of what it is and how to use it, and not necessarily actually using the tool itself. So I think that from an ROI perspective, I think transactional data is fantastic. Use what you have about the consumer, and always be mindful of what is the delta in terms of, and testing can prove any business case for better or worse.
Yeah, and just to follow on to that, completely agree. I think it's really easy to get lost in the allure that is technology. We're a Salesforce Marketing Cloud partner, we're a Demandware partner, and chosen some of the best technology in the marketplace. However, technology in and of itself is not going to accomplish anything if it's absent of the right strategy to drive it, if it's absent of the right people to execute on that strategy. And so part of what we think is a prerequisite is a lot of the brands that we serve, when we encounter them, they have one common attribute, which is that they're preciously thin either from an IT standpoint or from a marketing execution standpoint. There's only so many resources in place, or both. There's only resources in place to address some of these challenges. So having said that, it's core to find a partner who can either IT and do some of the integration work that's required to break down these data silos, and two, help shape your strategy. And shaping your strategy isn't merely coming up with what I'll call the opening salvo. It's testing and measuring over time and using that data to optimize the strategy going forward and optimize the user experience. So to your point, measurement, it's core and it's vital, and we're using analytics to track open rates, conversion. We're tying back to point of sale to know when the consumer ended up in store. We're tying into the loyalty platform to incent the consumer to reach the next level. But all of that measurement, if you will, and then program optimization is sort of
Yeah, just to add on that, I'm actually not even completely sure if this is an urban myth or it actually happened, but I heard a story years ago about a brand who had complex, great database with all of these great customer profiles and segments, and was sending an email to their list, and instead of custom publishing first name, they accidentally custom published the name of the segment that person was in. So it was like, hi, affluent white male, like, would you like to buy our product? So I mean, it's an example of, you can invest time in technology and, building up segments, but it's obviously having the right driver car and knowing how to use that effectively, and I just think that's core to any data strategy.
I've actually gotten that email. I wasn't the affluent white
You're
male.
an affluent white male?
And I forgot the brand, so that's lucky.
Okay, I didn't just make that up. Okay.
No, you didn't make that up. I think I've gotten two. So I've worked with clients who have invested in email systems, and they are finding that the email systems they're using are dated and limited based on kind of the next greatest thing. One possibility that we heard this morning is they just may not know how to use them correctly, and they don't know the full power of them.
Sure.
How would you try to avoid that situation as either someone selling email systems or promoting them, or someone that is buying one?
Well, as coming from that world, I've experienced both sides of it, both dealing with clients and also being a consumer of those goods. I think my number one recommendation for a provider internally, do not do it. I've worked with people who have tried to do it, and it's a failing proposition. The company that I'm currently with right now, we have invested a large amount of money moving towards a new sales software solution, because the one we're using now was built internally as a proprietary software over 10 years ago and has not been updated in the past 10 years. So every time someone asks me, oh, well, how many people are booking, children's birthday parties and in which centers? I say to them, I have no idea, because my tools can't tell me that, because no one has been updating them over time. So I definitely recommend outsourcing, a lot of the technology, because they have the research and development department. They have the budgets to attend these seminars and across the figure out what's new on the cutting edge, and they always have a project roadmap or a tool roadmap. What's going to happen next quarter? What's going to happen a year from now? There's always something else. I think that there are very few technology companies that just rest on their laurels and just say, hey, this is what we're offering you, and we're not going to do anything new. They're always telling you about what the product roadmap is going to be. So it's, trusting your vendor partners. I mean, I think you have to understand or recognize what type of engagement is going to work best for you, whether you're a self-serve, whether you're a full serve, or whether you're some kind of hybrid solution. So I'm a big fan of going the hybrid solution route, where there are certain times when you need to, so my email production team is in-house, and I love having them in-house because just a couple of years ago we outsourced that. That was problematic when it was 6:30 p.m. on a Friday and my CEO wanted to send a message out. I'm like, well, I could try to bribe these people to stay late. Fee that is going to really kill my ROI. So having those people in-house is really great, and it's dependable and it's cheap to do it in-house. But on the other side, I like working with technology companies and using their database programmers or talking to the VAs and using their data scientists to help me with my custom reports and my analytics. So it's understanding the sliding scale of what I feel comfortable taking under my wing or under my roof and having internally, and what do I feel like I need to pay a premium for, because what you're paying for is that person's subject matter expertise, and a lot of times the great thing that they bring to the table is the experiences that they've had with other clients. So they've learned the hard way, what things to avoid and what things work, so hopefully you don't have to go through those same trials and tribulations.
Yeah, so there's a ton of really cool email technology in the marketplace, and increasingly what we're seeing is we're continually evaluating what we consider state-of-the-art with these technologies. But I think that the element key towards technology are as follows. One, the ability to aggregate and persist data type will. My ability to seamlessly understand who this customer is, what their response history is, not just in email but in other channels, is sort of core. So the ability to pull that data in is one thing I'd look for. The second is if you can get it and you can get good technology, you want omni-channel delivery capability. So I'm talking SMS, I'm talking push, email, all together in one cohesive cloud, if you will. The third attribute that we're looking for is the ability to set up automated journeys. What we can do with that technology is displace a bunch of people. We're not so dependent on having a large email services team in place. We can set up complex journeys with conditional logic that literally flow the consumer offers, content, data in their channel of choice. It may be SMS for some, email for others, but those are certainly three key things. And then more and more what we're seeing with the cloud-based solutions is predictive intelligence applied. So the ability to use predictive analytics to understand what's the right content to present to this consumer, what are the right recommendations to pull into an email, if you will, and increasingly what's the right content or experience on the website. And some of those tools cross over to both. But those are things that I'd go looking for unless you were a startup brand. And startup brands are best by an email-only platform.
Awesome. So this is what I heard, and every time you said something, I was like, I've totally heard that. I've totally felt that pain, which was and kind of be predictive. And I forgot the fourth one, but it felt like it was something that was also like right up there. To me, those are very convincing things to look for. If I were to be evaluating an email to build it, is there those that's more powerful in your experiences with conversations with clients, and is there one that is more convincing to you, Jackie, on the other side of things?
Meaning pick from one of the following?
Which of those, like, yeah.
Which is most important to
Yeah.
you? So I'm actually, my company is in the middle of an email or ESP RFP right now, funny enough. We're in the finalist stage, which is exciting. I think what we're looking for is companies that hit on all of those, strong technology stack, a strong product roadmap and understanding of where the tool is going to go, a great professional services offering. So your tool is only as good as how well you know how to use it and how your vendor is enabling you or helping you to use their tool. Back when I was on the ESP side, I had some clients that never logged into the tool because my team did everything for them, which is fine. But if you're going towards you work for the ESP, it's your job to make sure that, your client can know your tool and really work with your tool. So, and understanding on the ESP side, now we're really kind of, the technology world is full of acronyms. We love acronyms so we can sound really smart and like business insiders. But, ESPs are really turning into MSPs. So it's not just, and when I say ESP, what we're in the now is both the technology, send email and SMS. But, no one's going to self-recognize MSP. They're all going to be MSPs, and they're marketing service providers. So it's one platform, and you can send your email, you can display, you can send a text message, dual push app, you can follow a person on Facebook. And I think that's really something that process. The one thing that I think on the client brand side, I'm a little, I think wary of is a lot of times agencies and companies say they can do anything and they're a jack of all trades. And you know that term, it's jack of all trades, master of none. And there are some companies and agencies that are like, we do one thing and we do it really well. And I think sometimes what I found in my past, workings with certain service providers is they try to do too many things, and they might have a really strong offering in email, but their SMS is complete SMS part to the mobile. It's a completely different experience. It's not intuitive. So it's also really vetting and understanding that they can do they can do what they're claiming to do in a really good fashion. And be wary of it, especially on the display side of things, because there's a whole, retargeting I think it works really well. But in the world of media buying and ad placements, there's some relationships and buying power that you just need from external companies. And if you're just starting and you're in the infancy of placing digital ads, there's still a lot to be learned there.
Yeah, so I completely concur in terms of things to look for. I think that Jackie hit it right on the mark. Fortunately, she comes out of our space and obviously understands the technology end of things. Most marketers don't. They're frankly confused by the technology, by the claims of all the providers and what have you. So my advice to anybody out there looking for a platform is find somebody that literally can be Switzerland, that understands the technology, but more importantly can implement it, right? Find a partner who you can pull close, who can help you break those data silos down, make sense of the technology, pick the right technology for you, because not everybody needs a marketing cloud per se. So I think it's far more important to really focus on who's the agency partner. The software companies are good at selling software. That's what they do. Our partner Salesforce didn't get to be one of the world's largest technology companies by accident. They got there not only by inventing good technology, but by selling it and then continuing to focus on upselling the suite. And again, buying technology for technology's sake is not a winning proposition. So encourage you to find somebody that can help you sort of vet through all of the claims and the data, pick the right technology, but more importantly, integrate it with all the rest of your systems.
Do we have time for one more?
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Okay, great. So we've talked about integration with a lot of different systems, and that is definitely one of the things that we always want to do. There's another voice, and it particularly is important when we think about email and the one-to-one messaging, which is the sales group, because the sales group, they're like one-to-one messaging done like completely personalized. They're right there with the customer. They just don't scale. So email is kind of like sales at scale, and sales is kind of like email completely personalized. How do you organizationally or structurally, or how have you seen these really work well together, or are there any third rails that you really want to avoid when you're trying to have the best email experience?
Well, I mean, it's kind of easy the way that my company is structured because we don't have an outbound sales team. Our entire sales team is inbound. So the outbound arm of the sales team is the marketing team. So it's our responsibility and our duty to go out and to drive those leads. And we do that in a number of different ways. You know, we look at when people, you know, booked a party with us, and, you know, if it was a birthday party, we should be reaching out to you a little before, a year after. So we're the ones driving that demand. And then these people are either booking online, which is actually still very new to our company. I oversaw the construction of our e-commerce platform just about a year ago now, so it's still very much in its infancy, but the vast majority of sales are done over the phone. So, you know, we're taking it from a many-to-one relationship where we're sending out the communications based on the data that we have so that they seem one-to-one, although they are personalized. And then when a person wants to book and has questions, they have a follow-up with a sales rep. And that's what takes it from the many down to the one relationship. And the sales rep does the back and forth and follow-up. I think that the holy grail of integrated communications is going to be working with a service provider that can facilitate triggered messaging and large-scale messaging, but then also act like an Outlook and also, you know, facilitate the one-to-one and the follow-ups. So, you know, obviously we don't want too many channels going after a person altogether, and there are times when the sales team is saying, hey, can we reach out to people who had a party with us a few months ago? And we're like, no, you're not outbound, we're outbound. So, you know, structurally I can understand that there is probably going to be a lot of difficulties and overlaps between an outbound sales team and the marketing team in terms of like who's owning that lead and, you know, driving them into the conversion. But I think there are ways to do it. And, you know, putting everyone under one integrated team with one, you know, head and direction, I think is really powerful. I know it's not possible for all companies, but it's really nice when you can align yourselves under the same goals and the same vision.
Yeah, and along the lines that I was alluding to earlier, there's different strokes for different folks, and so when we start to think about integrating the sales experience in email, there's platforms that excel at that. There's platforms like Marketo and Eloqua, HubSpot, Pardot, and what have you, that are specifically geared towards those use cases, and they tend to be better. Having said that, for the larger enterprise brands, quite likely what they're beginning to do is integrate clouds. In the world of Salesforce, that means tying Sales Cloud into Marketing Cloud, if you will, and using that sales history data, that rich sales history data that sits there in order to begin to personalize touches with the consumer or the customer on an automated basis. So I think it's key to get the technology right, and then beyond that to be able to mine the data that sits resident in whatever that sales automation platform is.
Great. We have some time for questions. Yep. I'll get it to you.
My question's for you, Jackie. As far as your centers that you have, and looking at the data that you have, do you do any type of geo-tracking or geo-marketing based on regions within the U.S. that might, whether it's seasonal as far as the increase in bowling goes?
Oh, absolutely. Everything that we do is geo-based. From the simple business need in that we have over 300 centers across the U.S., we're not in every single state. We're in most states, but we're not in every single state. We need to know how far a person is from a center, what center to drive them to, and also, we're not a franchise. We own and operate all of our centers, but we do give our general managers a certain amount of autonomy so that they can feel like they're the CEO of their center and their organization, and empower them to understand which specials and promotions they want to participate in. So, for example, we do a college night. And, it's a national program, but the centers can choose whether or not they want to participate in it. And if they don't have a very strong, college, demographics, or if they already do really well in business on Wednesday nights, they don't need the gimmick or the promotion. So we empower them to kind of pick and choose what they want to participate in. We have to know what's your preferred center in order to advertise to you what promotions are available, what the price point is. And it's really important to us, across the U.S. And then, the other thing to hit on in terms of weather-based patterns and seasonality, our business is hugely seasonal. So, it's a double-edged sword. When it's like a bright, sunny, nice day in the spring and summer, I get happy because I love sunshine, but it also means maybe not as much revenue because people are going outside and they're not necessarily going bowling. So when it's raining outside or when it's extreme heat, we kill it in our numbers. So, it's understanding those patterns as well. So pushing to people, maybe we have a ton of centers in Arizona. The messaging to them should be go bowling. It's too hot outside. Whereas in other parts of the other parts of the country, that messaging is going to be different. So everything we do is based on geo. We don't have an app yet, but I think it's on the road, our product roadmap for the future. That would be fantastic because a lot of what we do is just based on how far you are from a center. So our customers vary wildly to a young mom who's trying to book a birthday party for her 5-year-old daughter, to the VP of employee relations of JP Morgan who is trying to plan a Christmas party and who has a budget of $1 million, to a 68-year-old league bowler from the Midwest who goes bowling and drinks beer with his buddies every Friday night. So whatever walk of life you're in and whatever stage you're in, knowing where you are geographically is really important to us. So doing that in a display channel is really important. Self-identifying via the email channel, and reaching out via SMS is actually something that we do quite a lot as well.
As these platforms, as one person-to-person marketing or person-to-person communication starts migrating so quickly, especially on mobile platforms, into chat, various forms of messaging, how imperative is it for brands to follow along? Are they even welcome in those environments?
Do you want to take this?
So I think it depends on the brand. Obviously, somebody that's marketing to a younger demo that's absolutely SMS-centric, you betcha. Somebody that's marketing to older, outdated boomers like myself, probably not so much so. So I think it's really focused on the brand, but quite certainly we're starting to see a big aggressive shift, not only to mobility factors, but to some of these online chat forums, if you will. What's been interesting to us is to watch some of the cloud providers begin to integrate them into their platforms and begin to allow for messaging into those mediums. So I think it's brand dependent to answer your question, but certainly if your demo is younger, I'd start to look at those things as well. One of the pieces of advice we give the brands that we serve, especially that are trying to be relevant to the younger demos, is a lot of those demos have become email agnostic. So continuing to try to reach them with email is failure. I've got a 27-year-old stepdaughter and 30-year-old stepson, and I can't reach them via email, but if I text them, I'll hear from them right away.
A lot of it has to do with the context as well. So you could be within one brand, but you have permission to reach out to certain people on certain devices based on the context of the message you're sending them. So if I've booked, let's say a 40th birthday party for a friend, and it's a big investment, and I get a text message confirming all of my details for tomorrow, that's welcome and that's nice. The same way when I'm going on a flight, I'm going to get a text message, and that isn't overstepping its bounds. That's welcome. I want to see that confirmation. But if I get a text message and it's like, hey, Jackie, come to McDonald's and buy a burger, I'm like, why are you contacting me on my phone? And this is an invasion of privacy. So I think it's all about, what it is that you're saying to a consumer, when you're saying to them, and what that appetite is for consuming that form of advertising or marketing.
We have to wrap. I want to thank all of you very much. This was great.
Thanks, guys.
And I also wanted to mention, one of the reasons we did this, again, as I mentioned, is we have a